What's up, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls around the world? I would like to welcome you back to the Real Talk with Zuby podcast. Today, we are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada. We've got a very special guest in the house, had to travel all the way out here to come see him over the pond, over the coast. And I'm here today with the one and only Alex Hormozi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very honored, genuinely.
Awesome, man. Alex, it's so good to have you on the show. I've been following you for a while, listening to your interviews, listening to the videos you're putting out there on YouTube and other platforms. And first of all, I love what you're doing. It's awesome.
Thanks.
It's inspiring. So for people who have been living under a rock and are not familiar with who you are and what you do, please introduce yourself to the audience.
So I own a portfolio of companies right now that makes a good amount of revenue. Before that, I sold 3 companies in 2021, 2 for $46 million and 1 for an undisclosed amount. That was an all-stock deal. Before that, I owned a chain of gyms that I grew organically. Started sleeping on the floor there. And before that, I was a guy who graduated college, didn't know what to do, went into management consulting for 2 years, decided I didn't like that, and decided to, quote, pursue my passion, which was fitness at the time. And it was also the only business of the 3 businesses I thought of starting that I could pretty much start without too much money. And so I put my $50,000 I had saved up at 23 into that. And so I kind of reverse told you the story, but but that's more or less how I got to where I'm at now. And so now we, after we sold the companies, we started acquisition.com, which is the portfolio. And the whole idea was, I'm a big believer that there's magic between something old and something new. And so, the investing private equity model is not new by any means. But like social media and influence is kind of still a new thing overall. And so I was like, I wonder if there's something in between there where we can use social media to build trust, provide value, and then hopefully just have companies come inbound that are like, hey, I've read all your stuff. I've gone through, I love how you do business. We do business the same way. And so it would create a more lubricated deal process. And that was just kind of a theory when we started it. But it has worked out. And so that's what we do now. So we buy businesses, both majority and minority interests in them, and help them grow.
That's awesome, man. Well, I think a lot of people who know you will sort of be aware of you and everything you're doing just over the last few years as you've come to more prominence and become a public figure. But I'm always curious with any guest that I have on or anyone I'm speaking to who's achieved success in something, I'm always curious to go way back and find out more about their life journey. So tell me more about your growing up. What was Alex Hormozi like as a kid and through school?
I was an only child for the first half. Then my dad remarried, and then I had 2 step siblings. I was pretty much just raised by my dad for the most part. So I was a pretty quiet kid. Just did my homework, did my sports. Kind of kept to myself for the most part. Once I got into middle school, that was really tough for me. Getting to high school, I started to I went through puberty kind of earlier. So I had muscles. There's pictures of me on the internet. I was pretty fit. And I had pretty good genes for that stuff. And so that's actually what kind of got me into fitness was I had a teacher who was like, hey, he's like, you lift? And I was like, no. He said, you've got the genes. He's like, I'll show you after school if you want. So I went with this guy after school, and he showed me how to work out during my freshman year of high school. And I looked like I worked out. And that kind of set a little bit of the direction of my life. That kind of got me into what I would consider my relatively angry phase of my life.
Okay.
Late high school, early college. I had a very woe is me outlook on life. I felt like I had been wronged. Whether it's true or not is kind of irrelevant. But that was how I perceived the world at that point.
What did you feel you were wronged about?
Who knows, teenage angst. But, I felt like I had a bone to pick with both my parents in general. The classic feelings of being misunderstood, not giving your liberty, having approval from parents withheld from you despite, at least for me, I tried very hard to gain the approval of my parents. And so, I was on 3 varsity sports teams. I was the editor-in-chief of the literary magazine, the vice editor of the newspaper. I was in shape. I tried to do everything I could. But I didn't think that I felt like it was the goalpost continued to move. And that's fine because at the end of the day, where I am today, I'm grateful for who I am. And I can blame them both for that. But coming up, I definitely didn't have the perspective I think that I do now. And so I was an angrier kid, and that was kind of it. And everything kind of broke through for me around like 19-ish.
Okay.
I had this psychology course that I was taking in college, and we had to write an essay about someone we knew who had a mental disorder or something, like, because it was psychology. So you had to like pick something and then tell the story of how they could have potentially gone in that direction from their perspective. So it's a really interesting assignment. And I wrote about my mother, and in so doing, one of my favorite quotes, Pascal is, and he was the mathematician, Pascal's triangle, Blaise Pascal. He was also a Christian theologian, so it's kind of interesting. And he said, to understand is to forgive. And so when I wrote my mother's story from the fact that she was, born in France, came here when she was 4, got beat up as a kid because she could, didn't speak English, the classic, and this was, before it was frowned upon to beat up foreigners.
We've progressed in some ways.
Yeah, we've progressed. You're right. And so anyways, I was thinking about that, and her father was a super immigrant from Serbia. And so, you have a Serbian man who escaped the Nazis with his family, comes here, builds a life for himself, and, kicks them up out of bed no matter what every morning, like just militant. And that's okay, because that's, he realized the opportunity they had. But I was like going through this and thinking, it makes sense that she had some, like she is this way, right? And so all of a sudden I remember coming back from college and seeing her, and I didn't see her that much beforehand, anyways. And I remember, I don't know, she mouthed off at me for something. And I just remember this kind of very disarming moment being like, I can't be angry with you. And then she just looked at me, I was like, I get it. I get it. It was tough. Yeah. And like, I'm sorry. And then she just like burst into tears, and, and it was like a nice moment there. So that was like a big life lesson for me. It was like, most of the times if I'm angry, it means I don't fully understand the situation or both people's context. And so I think that was kind of a big breakthrough for me as a person, because I was like, this person that I've like held all this anger towards, if I understood more, my anger came from ignorance. Yep. And so that's been a frame that I've tried to approach situations. And when I start feeling angry about something, I'm like, what do I not understand? And that kind of helps me diffuse those things. And so I think over time that's helped me in business scenarios and business settings make better decisions. Yeah. Because I mean, we're all human. We all have emotions, but the degree to which we allow the emotions to affect our decisions, I think is the thing that we have some level of control over. Yeah, absolutely. And that's powerful. And I think that of all emotions and feelings people can have, I think resentment is one of the most deadly ones. Yeah. Both for yourself and for other people. I think it's so limiting. And I think there are so many people in this world, sometimes with good reason, right, who feel and harbor resentment towards other people within their family, people they've met, people who wronged them when they were in school 20, 30, 40 years ago, sometimes even their own spouse or their own children, whatever it is. And it just eats people up. And it's such an impediment, because if you are angry, I mean, there are times when you can use anger as a motivator if you channel it well to go on and do something successful. But it can be disruptive and destructive, and it manifests in all these sort of different ways. And I just think there's so many people in this world right now walking around with that within them. Yeah. You see it offline, you see it online. Just that person who, you post a video of you working out, and they're like mad at it. And it's like, I'm like, why are you angry? Why are you lashing out at someone posting a video or a photo of them in the gym? And it's like, all right, there's something I'm not trying to psychoanalyze everyone, but I'm like, man, there's something going on in the background there, and you're not angry at this person, but there's something here that's like triggering you. So you had this breaking point at 19 where you really shifted your mindset. Were you already an entrepreneur at this time in any sort of way? I was in zero ways was I an entrepreneur at this point.
Okay.
So yeah, at that point I kind of got my shit together. Darn.
Got my
stuff together. And I started cleaning up my act. So I had been kind of like a party boy leading into that. So I just always was out drinking, always partying, always just chasing after girls. And then at that point, I was like, I need to take life seriously because this is, my track is not good. And so I kind of applied the same thing that I was doing in high school from an achievement perspective back in college. And then I did well the last 2 years because I graduated in 3. And kind of followed the path, got a job as a management consultant, which was, at least for me, it was investment banker, management consultant. The primary reason was they made the most money.
Yep.
And so that's why I picked it.
I used to be a management consultant as well.
Oh yeah, where?
Yeah. Accenture.
Okay. Yeah. No, we were a subcontractor under Booz Allen. So it was defense contracting, public sector stuff. Anywho, in a past life, I had a top secret clearance and all that fun stuff that came with it. It sounds only cool to say.
Yeah.
But did that for 2 years, realized I didn't really enjoy the work. And that was when I got really depressed. It was a very hard time in my life at that point because I felt like I had done everything I was supposed to do and it hadn't resulted in what I had hoped. And so at this point I had moved back home. So I went to school, away from home, went back home.
Where was home at this point, by the way?
Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay.
And so went back home, had this job, and I'd done at this point everything that my father had wanted me to do. And it was his approval that I was seeking. And the thing is like I had his approval, but it didn't hit the way I wanted it to. And so what I realized was I didn't have my own approval. And so in realizing that, as at least for me, the source of my depression was that I was not proud of who I was because I did not feel like I was free. Because I felt like I had made a lot of the decisions I had made up to that point in my life because of expectations of other people that I was trying to meet.
Got it.
And so having met those expectations and not met my own, I felt a big discrepancy. And so it was about 6 months of me going back and forth of like, I really want to get into fitness. I really want to start my own business. And I'd always call my dad up and he'd be like, give it time, go to, whatever. And so then I was in the process of applying to business school and, do your 2 years and then you do that whole game. And the first question for Harvard's, for HBS was, how will Harvard Business School MBA help your short and long-term goals? And I stared at the question for like 3 days. And I realized for me, it didn't because I wanted to ultimately start a business. And so I thought about, okay, well, $180,000 plus the opportunity cost of time versus what I can learn in 2 years, not spending $180,000 and making money during that period of time. And I looked at the average incomes after HBS was like between 120 and 180. And I was like, I think I could figure that out.
Yeah.
And so I still didn't get my dad's approval. And so I ended up actually driving across the country from Baltimore without telling anyone. And I called my dad halfway across the drive, being like, hey, by the way, I'm going to be doing this thing. And he was like, just come over. We'll have lunch. We'll talk about it. And I was like, I'm in Ohio. and then he kind of like snapped. Rightfully so, I guess. And we had a pretty hard time for the next 5 years.
Okay.
Didn't really talk too much to either of my parents because I was just trying to run this gym. And so that's when I went to California and started a gym without knowing anybody, which was honestly not as scary as it should have been because I was ignorant.
Okay.
But I do remember when I was sleeping on the floor of the gym and I was reading those motivation manifestos, it was not as cool as I thought it was going to be. Because like you want credit for the Rocky cutscene, but when you're in the Rocky cutscene, it's a lot longer than 30 seconds.
Oh yeah.
And so, I'm sleeping in a warehouse where there's cars that drive over the top of it and there's these metal partitions and this concrete box. It was like, and it would sound like a gunshot. Yeah. And so I was sleeping there. And so I'd wake up every hour of the night to new cars driving over it. And I pretty much like didn't sleep for the first like 6 to 9 months of me being in business because I would wake up at 4. The first people show up at 4:30 in the morning, teach all the sessions, which ended at 10. Then I would work the leads that came in overnight and clean the gym, set up the workouts for the afternoon. First people would show up at 4 until 8 taught sessions. And then I would do my sales consults from 8 until 10, meeting with people. And then from 10 o'clock until I couldn't keep my eyes open, I'd run credit cards, do the billing and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd wake up again at 4. And so it's just kind of this blur of life for me at that time. And I honestly don't think I would have been able to get through it if it hadn't been for the amount of resentment I had for my parents at that point. And it was just the fear of going back not successful that continued to drive me through that. And so like a lot of people, when they're thinking about starting a business or going out on their own, they're always like, I don't know what I'm passionate about, or like, I just can't find my, whatever the thing is. And, the vision for me was don't be broke.
Yeah.
And the motivation was not let my parents be right. And so, I'm a big fan, like, it's cool. A lot of people see where we're at now and they're like, must be nice. And and the real answer is yes, it is much nicer now than it was then. And I can have bigger visions that can motivate much higher tier people, to go towards a cause.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is like when you're started, you don't have that luxury. And I'm a big believer in the first rule of entrepreneurship is use what you got. And so if you've got pain, you've got anger, you've got shame, you've got fear, whatever that, you've got insecurities.
Yeah.
Like if you don't have the passion, use the pain.
I think something else you need to have, it's so interesting you telling that story because there are a lot of parallels with what I did after leaving my management consulting job. So people don't understand the grind, right? There's this period, oftentimes it's 7 to 15 years of just intense grind where the amount of work you're putting in versus the reward you're actually getting back is so minimal. And then, of course, you reach a certain stage after a decade plus, and you start getting the must be nice, or you got lucky, or I wish I got that lucky, or whatever it is. And I think that's often because people see the end result, although this is not the end stage, right? Mm-hmm. They see that, but they completely miss the 10 to 15 years prior to it, and they weren't there for it, and they probably would not trade their comfort to go through all the nonsense and all the rejection and all the discomfort. So for me, myself, I worked I studied at Oxford University. I graduated with a degree in computer science at the age of 20. And I did music full-time for a year, but then I moved it to London, worked in the corporate world, management consultant for 3 years, 2008 to 2011. Throughout this time, by the time I went full-time with my music, I'd put out 3 independent releases, sold a few thousand CDs, just traveling around, selling on the street, hand to hand. And then from 2011, when I went full-time, 2011 to early 2019, I was just hustling. I was just out there. My primary income for the first 6 years, literally just being out there on the street. I'm sure in certain cities, whether it's Vegas or New York or LA, London, you've come across guys selling their CDs in the street, right? So that was me. I was just out there every day, 5-6 days a week, traveling all over the UK, north, south, east, west, rain, snow. UK doesn't have the best weather. Snow, sun, whatever. I was just out there on the street all day talking to people. I sold over 25,000 CDs hand to hand.
Wow.
To sell 25,000 CDs, you know how many people you have to talk to?
A lot.
So when I tell people I've met over 500,000 people in real life, they always like, oh, no, you just talk on Twitter or whatever. I'm like, dude, you've missed the past 15 years. Yeah. I was just out there. And then eventually, 2014, I started doing pop-up shops. So, in shopping malls, you get those little kiosks in the middle. So my friend and I, we started our own shop, and we were selling our hats, T-shirts, CDs. We used to have our own brand of headphones. So we were selling all that. So from 2014 to early 2019, that was my main bread and butter. So I'd do one pop-up shop a month for kind of half the month, just be in there, make a small profit, sometimes barely break even because you have to pay all the rental fees for the shopping mall and all that for the space, and you have to pay for all the merchandise and all that. And that was it. I told people this on Twitter last year, but I think something important for people to know about my own story is 2020 was the first year that I made more money than I used to make in my corporate job. I left my corporate job at 24. Yeah. So it wasn't until I was 33 years old that I surpassed what I was doing back then. Because so many people thought, you're a rap. People think if you're a rapper, you're just making money, right? just because magic, right? Yeah. And people don't understand the grind that goes into it. So I even had people who thought that I went into this for explicitly, you just want to make more money. I was like, dude, if I want to just make money and be comfortable, I've got a degree from Oxford. I would have just stayed on that corporate path and, you know what I mean? Just stayed there. It would have been comfortable. But people miss all that. And then, so it's interesting. There's a lot of parallels with that story. So coming back to you starting this gym in California, what made you actually want to do that? And why in California? Because that's if you're in Baltimore, seems a little, I know you're into
far
fitness.
Away from home as possible.
Yeah, that's very far to just go over and start a gym.
Yeah. So there's two reasons. One was I wanted to get as far away from home as I could.
Okay.
And it sounds more dramatic than it was. It was, I just wanted space. You know what I mean? I didn't want to be in a day's drive away. Like I wanted to be in my own area. Because I think the thing that I felt very constrained. I felt like I was trying to meet the expectations of other people. And so I just wanted to go to a place where as little of that physically could affect me emotionally.
Yeah.
The other reason was I was between South Beach and California because they were the two fitness capitals, in my opinion, of the world at that point, or at least in the US. And so my thought process was, if I can win there, then I can win anywhere.
Okay.
And so I want to go where it's most competitive so that I can learn the best, most cutting edge stuff and then win there. And then I can kind of expand nationally. At least that was my thought going into it. But that was the main reason. And to a point you said earlier, I think people would be willing to do the grind, but they can't deal with the uncertainty.
Mm.
Because the thing is like, if you say, hey, hold your breath, and and the person starts holding the breath, it's easy to do that if you know the person's going to say you can breathe again in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
But if you just sit there and you're like just staring at them, like I feel like that's a lot of what the entrepreneurship thing is. It's like you save up some money and then you take the dive and you hold your breath and you're like, how long am I going to have to hold my breath? And the answer is you just don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the answer. I think that's the thing that most people are afraid of. And for me, that was my big fear because I just didn't know how long it was going to take. I knew I wouldn't stop, but I didn't know how long it was going to take.
Yeah. I love that analogy. I think another core part of it for someone like yourself or someone like myself is we had taken the more normal option to begin with. So it's almost like you're doing that. And there's also a rope that you can grab onto. So for some people, it truly is sink or swim, right? There's people who, they've got no family whatsoever. They're going to fall flat on their face and, be on the street if they don't make it. If it's like, oh, you've got a university degree, you worked in the corporate world before, it's like, man, I know I can just grab this thing and live a quote unquote normal life and be comfortable, but you're still there holding your breath with this delusional level of self-belief, knowing I know somehow, some way this is going to work out. I don't know how long it's going to take. It could be 5, 7, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
And also people don't understand it, right? People are there like, why are you holding your breath? Like, why don't you just be a normal person and do what normal people do? Why are you sleeping in the gym? Yeah. Like, what are you doing? Right. With me, I'd be just all over the place. Just, when I left my job, I got a Volkswagen transporter van. And I wrapped it in purple with the Zuby logo on the side. Yeah. I still got it. It's called the Zuby tank. And would just go on road trips up and down the country, just fill it up with CDs and just travel around. Yeah. And of course, to keep costs down, I mean, I didn't normally sleep in my van. I did a couple times, but I just stay in like the cheapest hotel possible. Yeah, I'm going to Manchester for a week. I'm just going to stay in the cheapest, crappiest hotel. Or if I've got friends there, cool, I'll stay on their sofa, I'll stay on their floor, whatever. Because if I go, I'm not making that much money. I'm making, on a good day, maybe 100 to 200 pounds. Yeah. And then if I go and I get a 100-pound hotel, it's like, well, what's the point? Yeah, I'm not making any profit at all. Yeah. So there's a lot of discomfort. And then with a musician grind, you add to that the gigging as well. So traveling around and doing shows. And again, people are like, oh, wow, you're on tour. That's awesome. I'm like, maybe it's awesome at like the top level right. where you don't need to organize anything yourself and you just show up, collect a giant bag of money and perform a couple songs, which everyone already knows the words to and you don't actually need to rap. But like if you're a lower level independent artist, like touring is a grind.
Yeah,
It's not fun.
And you have to bring your A game.
You've got to bring your A game, even if there's 10 people in the crowd.
Totally.
You can go there, you're looking at the crowd, half the audience is the staff. Right? The sound man, the people working at the bar, the security guys, whatever. And you've got like 5, 6 like hardcore fans who have been following you on MySpace or on YouTube or whatever. And those ones you don't even break even. And this is all the stuff that I like talking about it because I wish more entrepreneurs and more creative people did. I think so many interviews and so many conversations, it starts with the here and now. It's like, oh, cool. I'm here. I'm already a millionaire. Yeah. And this is all my stuff now. And it's like, well, wait, how did you... I'm more curious how someone made the first million than how they made the next however many. Because that first one, the zero to one,
hardest one.
That's the hardest. And that's where I think most of the life lessons are. So with that said, let's continue on this journey from you setting up this gym in California and sleeping in it, having the trains going over your head. Yeah. What was the first What was the first success?
So I was fortunate, very fortunate. And so I want to let the record show I am just a lucky person. And everything I have is from genetics and picking the right parents. That way, nothing I have is my own. But when I moved out there, I had... So I'll back up because I think this might be helpful for some people. So when I decided to go to California, I had emailed, I think, 40 or so gym owners that looked like they were doing okay online. No one got back to me except for this one guy. His name was Seven Figure Sam. That was what his thing was. And so he was good at like helping gyms be more profitable. And so I got on the phone with him and I told him that I was going to be there. And he was like, all right, whatever. I mean, you're in Baltimore. And so I just drove for 36 hours and then I showed up on his doorstep and he was like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, what's up? Well, let me learn. And he was like, I have things to do. Like you can like, he's like, where are you staying? I was like, I don't know yet. He was like, Jesus. He's like, you can stay at my place tonight. And so it was really nice of him to do that. And then the next day he said, you could be my apprentice. He said, I get to the gym at 4, so be here at 4. And he works till 4. So he would work 12 hours, you do 4 to 4. He's like, all these people think they can't have a family because he had kids and a wife. And he's like, they just aren't willing to wake up early. He's like, I get home at 4 and I spend the rest of I was like, that's interesting. And so I was able to learn the ropes relatively quick. I only did it for 3 or 4 weeks, just kind of like shadowing him around, understanding the business a little bit. And then I found a spot and he connected me with somebody in his group of gym owners, said, you guys should partner on this thing. And so we were going to split a location together because I had, some savings. He had some savings. We were going to do it, which by the way, terrible way to do a business partnership. You guys have the exact same skill set and might as well just split the money anyways. So needless to say, the night before we were supposed to sign the lease, the other guy backed out. And so all of a sudden I had to stomach the whole thing and all the money and all the upfront costs, which ended up being one of the biggest blessings in disguise. But a week before that guy had said, hey, let's go to this marketing conference. And this is 2013. And at that marketing conference, it wasn't even a conference, a workshop. It was 10 people. The guy taught this thing called Facebook ads. It's 2013. Let's talk about luck. You know what I mean? Like CPM's there. So cost per impressions for anybody who's listening is like, that's what you have to pay to advertise. And on Facebook, it was like $3. And so I was running ads for a gym as soon as I opened the gym. And so that allowed me to, I remember the first month I made the exact amount of money that my rent was, which was $4,972. And mind you, I had never made $4,972 of my, like me making it. I went from a job to that. Yeah. And that was where actually the panic set in. I was like, what if this doesn't work? I was like, I'm just going on this. And I had $5,000 saved up. So I'd spent like 45 or whatever opening the gym. And I had 1 or 2 months of rent's worth of money. And then I was out. That was it. Yeah. And so I broke even on that. And then, the next month I signed up the same amount of people. So we did 10,000, then 15, then 20, then 25, 20, 30, all the way up to 35,000 a month at that gym. And by month 9, I, had trainers and I had a manager and it started working. And so month 15, I opened my second location. And then I opened up a new location every 6 months after that. I mean, I can get in the tactics around this, but the way that we were able to do it is I had a pretty cool model, which allowed us to get a ton of customers for a low cost and a high amount of cash up front. So we could liquidate our acquisition cost and then we still had the back end. So I could get paid to get customers, which is why I could open every gym at full capacity on the first day. And so I didn't even have to front the money for the new gyms I would open. I would pre-sell them, use the cash from the pre-sale to buy all the equipment, paint the walls, get the sign, all that kind of stuff. And so I would open up in the black without ever having to front any money. And that's what allowed me to grow really quickly from like 23 to 26 in terms of my age. And so at that time I had 6 locations.
These are all in California?
5 were in California. And then the 6th one I opened in Virginia. Okay. So here's where it starts to get interesting. Okay. So I start to get to this point where I'm like, you know what? I've got 5 gyms. I was actually kind of bored. I was like, is this all there is to life? I reached like a different, moment. And I had seen this guy speak at this conference and he talked about internet marketing and all that kind of, and I didn't know anything. I didn't know much about it. And so I like Googled his name again and it was like, hey, I've got a mastermind. And so I was like, all right, whatever, I'll sign up for this thing. So I signed up for it and I explained my whole business model. And he says, right after I go through this like 30-minute, way more tactical than what I just went over, breakdown of like how I get all my gyms profitable and all this stuff. And he's like, you shouldn't be running gyms, man. And I it actually like crushed me in the moment. I was like, what do you mean? This is like my whole vision. United Fitness was like, I got this really strong brand at the trademark. I was like, we're going to be America's gym.
Yeah.
And he was like, I think you should be showing other gyms how to do what you do. He's like, opening a full capacity is like, that's not a thing. I was like, oh, really? I honestly, because I was so in my own bubble, I was like, of course you would open a full capacity. Why not do that?
Yeah.
It's way better. And so I actually from there started doing these gym turnarounds. So I started flying because I had the time. So I started flying to gyms and turning them around. So like I'd camp out in front of them. I'd run my ads and I would do all the sales myself and I'd sell them into the gym. So I just fill the gym up. And the deal was I got to keep the money I brought in and then they would keep the customers to get the back end. So it was no risk for them. And I didn't have to worry about dealing with the gym. So I just made all the money of opening a gym, except I didn't have to open a gym.
Okay.
And so I did 30 turnarounds over the next 2 years.
So you're like the Gordon Ramsay of gyms.
Kinda, yeah. I mean, we'd be like, I think you're using the square footage wrong. Like it kind of became like a system. But the rewind to me doing the first one, I do it. I think I did 2 or 3 launches in like a month. I made like $100,000 take home. And mind you, that was way more than I made from my gym because there's costs and all the other things.
Sure.
And so I was like, holy crap, no employees. I just made $100,000. Like, this is what I should be doing. And so I sold all my gyms in 90 days. I just fire sold them because I thought this was the opportunity. And of course, at this point, like everybody in my life is like, you work so hard to have these 5 gyms. What do you mean you're just giving them away? Whatever. And so the first guy that I ended up doing the thing with, that mastermind guy had an event, and so he asked me to speak on local businesses. So I spoke, and I had 100 people come up to me afterwards because I got all their business cards, say like, "What can I buy from you?" And I was like, "Nothing. I'm a gym owner. Like I have nothing to sell you." And so, but one guy said, "Here's my credit card." He said, "Charge me for $5,000 and let me know what I get later." And I took the credit card. I mean, I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't take, I got the number. And so anyways, when I got back from the conference, I called the guy up right before I was actually going to run it. I was like, are you sure? And he was like, yeah, run it. So I ran the card, went through. And I was like, okay. And he's like, cool, what do I get? And I was like, well, you know what? I promise you I'll make you more than $5,000. And so again, luck, child of luck. He had a gym he had to open. Okay. So this wasn't a gym conference. Just by chance, the guy had a gym. And by chance, he was opening one up.
Okay.
And so I was like, perfect. I'll fly out and do it. And that was the first gym I actually launched. And so that was what got me into figuring out how to like help other gym owners do it. That's what got me into it. Now, this guy in particular was like, dude, I can run these things. If you just open one up every month, I'll just come behind you and I'll like staff it. And then we can open a new gym every month. I was like, that sounds great. And so when I did sell my gyms to go all in on this kind of new opportunity, after I transferred all the money over to the account that we had shared, because I thought that's how you did it. Like one morning I woke up to the second gym I was launching with this guy and all the money was gone. And I was like, ooh, that's not good. That was all of the savings from the 5 years of me doing these gyms and selling them. That's tough. And so, I called him up. I was like, hey, what happened? He was like, well, I know you're skimming. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, that was just my half of the profits. I was like, I haven't taken anything out. Yeah. I was like, there's stuff, you know what I mean? And I had pre-sold like 370 people into this new location, which is a monster launch for a micro gym. But there was no cash to run the business. And so, and I had all these contracts I had to deliver on. And so at this point, I'd sold my 5. I have this one in Virginia. And I was like, what do I do? And this point is when, my wife at the time was just my girlfriend. And she was like, we should probably keep doing that other gym thing where you just like fly out, launch the gym and move on because that was working. And this guy's trouble. And so I lost all the money. And then I had like $25,000 or $30,000 just not in that account. And I funded all the payroll and I didn't sell any new customers because I didn't want to own a gym and run it because I was like, I'm already done with that season of my life. And so I just watched my personal savings just dwindle. And then I was able to shut it down in 6 weeks and I paid every refund that I needed to basically start over again. And at this point, we go to my girlfriend's parents' house for Christmas to meet them because I was this guy from the internet that was killing it. And I had told her to quit her job to join me to do this gym launch thing. And of course, now we have no money and I have no place. And so I'm staying in her bedroom, and I'm working in their grandkids' room with like a little chair. And so I'm like, I've got my laptop, I'm crunched over trying to like do work, but I was like, I can't believe this is my life. Yeah. And so to your point about like the parachute of like, I could just be a management consultant. Like, what am I, you know what I mean? But here I am 5 years later, and I was like, I have nothing to show for this. Like, and this is what I think is kind of interesting, is that I had nothing on paper to show for it, but I had all the skills that I had developed because over that time period, I'd done 3,000 sales, just like you with the CDs when I was just selling memberships. And so she got 6 of her friends to quit their jobs as well.
Wow.
Yeah, to start this thing. Mind you, we hadn't started yet.
Wow.
And it was going to start with all this money that I didn't have because it just got taken. And so it is now Christmas. So we have this one more launch I was going to do that I lined up, and we needed to crush this launch. And by chance, again, child of luck, I am born of luck. A guy reached out to me that he'd seen me speak something like 2 years earlier and was like, hey, do you have any sales jobs? And I was like, well, actually, kind of, maybe. Where are you? And he was like, San Diego. And I was like, that's actually where the gym is that I'm trying. He had no idea. I was like, well, where in San Diego? He was 10 minutes from the gym that I needed to do this launch at. And I was like, if I could get this month back, I could get all this other stuff ready. And so we launched the gym. The guy crushed it, did 100,000 in sales.
Amazing.
In the first month. And I was like, okay, I'm scot-free. And, but I saw the credit cards went through, we're stacking the contracts, but I was looking at the bank account and like nothing was happening. I was like, what's going on here? And I knew Tuesdays, if anybody's a small business owner, like, what days you get deposits. You know what I mean? Because you're like, your deposit days. And Tuesdays was always my big day because I got all my weekend money and it was always drop on Tuesdays. And so Tuesday comes and like nothing happened. And then Wednesday and then Thursday, then Friday. And then I called them up. They're like, oh, it's a standard review account. We do it every year. It's like, I've been with you guys 5 years. I've never had a review. Okay. Monday, next Tuesday hits, nothing. I was like, okay, what's going on here? And so I called 2 more times. They didn't give me the time of day. And then finally, it was Christmas Eve, and I got on the phone with their support. I said, I will not get off this phone until you send me money. Yeah. Like you have $100,000. I need the money. Yeah. Because all of her friends were starting on the 26th, 2 days later. And the long story short of this is they said, it's been a regular activity. You're selling, you're processing credit cards in different areas, and this is supposed to be for a local gym because I didn't know that you had to switch payment processors if you had a new business. So I'm running all this revenue through one location, like a location that was meant for a gym, which made no sense. Yeah. And so, rightfully so, they were like, "This is suspicious. We're gonna stop it." And so they held all the funds, and so I didn't get the money. Yeah. And so I had, at this point, exactly $23,000 left in everything. I'm rough. I just remember each of the moments. $23,000 left. I owed him $22,000 in commissions for sales that I never got. Yeah. And so I didn't want to like give myself a chance to think about it. And so I wired him 22, and I had $1,000 left. It was December 20th or 20 whatever day it was, 2016. Yeah. So if everybody's like, see what we're doing now, like that was 2016 December, $1,000. And so I still had my credit card from all my gyms. Now, even though I didn't have them anymore, I still had the card, and the Amex hadn't changed my limit yet. And so I had a $100,000 limit on my card. And so 2 days later, I pushed the ads live for 6 sales guys to be launching 6 different gyms and areas. I didn't have a way to process money, but I had a way to spend money, which is a terrible combination. And so I'm spending $3,300 a day. $3,300
a day. Wow.
I had 1,000 total. So by lunch, I had, I was now broke, and by dinner, I was 2,000 in debt. Yeah. And that was rental cars, airfare, hotel rooms, commissions, ad spend, everything for 6 guys. And to be fair, I did not treat these guys well they were staying at the cheapest motel. I was like, just deal with it, get McDonald's, I don't care. And so at the end of the month, I had all these contracts and I still couldn't run the money. Called everyone I could, and finally I got a high risk processor. So if you don't know what that is, like when you go to Chipotle, they have a normal bank that processes their money. But if you see like online gambling and like porn and casinos and stuff, like they go to high risk processors who pay way higher fees, and they have all these crazy terms. And so I got one that said, sure, we'll process for you, but we get 10% of all revenue.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, that was the fee. Boy. And at this point, I was so desperate. I was like, fine, just take it. Like, I just need to process money. And so I got a $50,000 limit. Mind you, I'm spending $3,300 a day. If you add it up, that does not work. So I do $50,000 on the last day of January. And the guy who set it up when was like, hey, good news is it's $50K a month. So it starts per calendar month. So on the 1st of February, you can run another 50.
Okay.
So I did 50 and then 50. And that $100,000 covered my credit card bill like to the dollar. And so for everyone who's tracking at home, I'm still broke. Yeah. And so then I got 2 more online for 50 and 50. And then and then they bumped my limit on the other one, whatever. And so that next month we did 200 something thousand in sales. And I made like $30,000 in profit. And I was like, I'm home free. But then the next month, the gyms that we launched, the 6 gyms that we launched in January, and then we launched another 6 in February. Layla tapped me on the shoulder because I'm thinking I'm like entrepreneurial genie. I'm a phoenix, baby. Like, you know what I mean? I come back. And so she taps me on the shoulder and I'm like, what? What is this, my love? My queen, And she just spins her laptop towards me and she's like, look at this. And I was like, what am I looking at? And it was our bank account. And it was all these negative transactions. And each one of them was as big as the rent that we now were able to afford. Mind you, it was like $1,000. And I'm just seeing like 500, 500, 500, 500, 300, 500, like all the way down. And she just kept scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I was like, what is going on? And she said, hey, well, those gyms that we were selling the memberships at, I have a cell phone for all of them to call me for support issues, whatever. And all these people are saying that this gym owner stood up on a chair because we had sold too many people into his gym, and he just told them all to refund. And he said, just refund, go home. I don't want to deal with this because it wasn't their money. You know what I mean? Like the deal was we would collect the cash, they would service the customers, and they got the back end. But some guys, like when you have a 70-person gym and you take it to 270 in 30 days, they can't handle that.
Too many people.
Yeah, you just triple, quadruple their gym. And so again, I was an inexperienced entrepreneur. I didn't know that. And so I was like, just deal with it. You have all these customers, but they didn't collect any revenue. So like it was just incurring costs for them to do this. I understand a little bit more now. But then, and that was like $50,000. And I was like, oh shit. And then darn. And then 2 days later, another wave hit. And it was a different situation where the guy saw that we had made $40,000, $50,000 from his gym. And the average gym owner, for perspective, takes home $36,000 a year. So when you see that CrossFit down the street, they're not killing it. They're probably getting killed. He saw us, some kids from the internet, take out $50,000 from his place in a month, and he didn't make that last year. And so he was like, "Hey, everybody who just signed up with them, refund through them, and I'll let you do it through me for half the price."
Oh boy,
yeah. And so now, and mind you, I had already had all these processing issues. So I'm like, oh my God, we're going to lose processing again. Yeah. And I will tell you this: when you don't have the ability to process money, it is very hard to do business because like I couldn't sell my way out of not being able to process money. There's nothing I could do. And so I now have to somehow, and it ended up being $150,000 in total. I was like, I have to come up with $150,000 in 30 days in profit.
And this is after just going through.
After losing it all from the theft thing, and then after losing it all again from the processing thing. And then now we're doing it again. So here I am, and I have to figure out how to make $150,000 in 30 days. And so I'm just like staring at the screen, and I try to like brainstorm. I was like, okay, what if we sold everybody supplements? What if we, I'm just thinking. And so Leila, we're sitting, I got up earlier. I wasn't really getting up. I really couldn't sleep. But she gets up, the next morning or 2 mornings later, and she starts working on her laptop. And she had this little side business of personal training clients that she was doing online. She had transitioned. She was a personal trainer before. And so all of a sudden I like start interrogating. I was like, wait, how much money do you make from that? She's like, I don't know, like $4,000 a month. And she's getting defensive. She's like, hey, it pays for the rent and our food. You know what I mean? Like your big entrepreneur ideas, like you just make a lot and then lose a lot. Like ours pays, puts food on the table. Yeah. I was like, no. But I was like, but how much time does it take you? She's like, I don't know, 2 hours a week. And I was like, you make $4,000. I was like, that's not a bad gig. And that's it. There's no other cost. She's like, no. I was like, I got it. So what if I start running ads and we'll just sell direct to consumer? We already know how to, the whole gym thing hasn't worked out. Like, let's just sell weight loss. And so she was like, is this really what we're going to do? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so I built the best sales letter of my entire life, started running ads to it. And she starts taking phone calls, and we started doing $1,000 a day. And it's all, profit. It was digital products. And so I'm like, holy crap. Okay. Well, this is kind of working. Now, if I have at this point, we had 8 sales guys because I had to start outselling the refunds to cover the refunds. Yeah, it was terrible.
And did you still have her 6 friends working for you at this time? Okay.
Yeah, and we added 2 more.
Okay.
And so she starts doing $1,000 a day. And I was like, wait, if we get the 8 guys, they could each do 1,000 a day. It's 8,000 a day with basically no cost. I was like, that's 240 minus commissions. I was like, we could get out of this. And
how were you? Just to clarify, how were you doing the 1K a day?
Yeah, so we were running ads to a sales page that was like, hey, we're doing a 16-week transformation. It was called Queen Transformation. I made it her brand because Layla lost 100 pounds. So I had all these pictures, like had this whole story anyway. And so we went from there to just scheduling.
Got it.
A scheduling link and then a group. And so she would
Facebook ads.
Yep, Facebook ads. And then she would post content in a group, and anybody who commented, she would try to get on a call with. Just normal, online hustling. And so anyways, that was the plan. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm going to call the gyms up that are supposed to launch next month and let them know that we're not going to be flying out. And so I'll call the first guy up and I tell him the whole story. I was like, hey, we're not doing it anymore, blah, blah, blah. And he said, dude, you launched my buddy's gym and you crushed it for him. Like, I know you can do this and I need this. I just maxed out all my credit cards. I refinanced my house for this gym. Like, I really need, I just need customers, man. And honestly, at this point in my life, I was at such a low point that I was like, I don't have a lot of empathy right now. my empathy tank was low. Yeah. And so, but anyways, what ended up coming out was I was like, listen, man, I can't do it. But he said, can you just show me how to do it instead if you can't fly out here? And I was like, well, I'll show you, but if you can't close, I'm like, I'm not flying out there. He said, no, it's fine. And so he was like, well, how much? And so I said, the highest number I could think of at the time, because I wanted him to say no because that thing was working. I just wanted to do that. So I said $6,000. And he was like, 6K? I was like, yeah. And he's like, oh, done. And I remember just staring at the phone and then like, pushing my jaw back into I was like, oh, what card do you want to use? Start with a 4. I start going through and I wrote it down on like some napkin. And then Layla comes back in 15 minutes later. She's like, I just got another one for $500, whatever we were selling the thing for. And I was like, I just sold our whole way of opening gyms for $6,000. She was like, what? I thought we were doing weight loss. I was like, yeah, I know. I just, maybe gyms is the right thing. We're just doing it wrong. And so I was like, well,
So you sold him the blueprint.
Yeah. Basically all the ads, all the landing pages, the scripts, the show. Because I'd already built all that stuff internally for my team. So like everything was done. The only thing that wasn't done was how to run the ads. But like I had a training for the gym owners so that they could like process the people and like give them nutrition. I had whole plans that were all white labeled. Everything was done. I just didn't have the ads part. So I just basically filmed an ad training on how I ran the ads. And I'd let them use videos of me because I knew those videos converted the best in every market. And so I get, the guy was like, when do I get it? And I was like, Monday. And it was a Friday. So I had to like put all this stuff together. And so I'm telling Layla between lunch and like between mouthfuls. And that next Monday, over the weekend, I told her, I was like, I'm gonna call these other guys up. And so that Friday, I finished calling the seven more guys and did $60,000 in sales that day.
60.
Yeah, in one day. And that was the day my life changed.
Wow.
And so that was when I was like, holy shit, darn. It's like, this is working. And I saw that I could get the $150,000 that I needed to just cover the bill on the refunds. And so she's like, well, what's the plan now? I was like, well, we did 30 launches. I'll just call all those guys up too. So I called all those guys up over the next, week or so. And we ended up doing like, I want to say high 200,000 in sales, but of this 100% margin product. And then from there, each one of those guys that used our whole blueprint, because they were now making the money instead of me, and they didn't have all the costs I did. I had to fly somebody out there at hotels, all this. Like, they didn't have any of that. They just like ran the ads and then they'd make money. And the average gym collected over $30,000 in new cash in the first 30 days.
Wow.
I mean, that's how I did it, right? That's how I was able to fund all these launches. So like it worked. And so they would get a 30-to-1 return on advertising up front before the back end.
That's massive. That's
how I opened all the gyms for free. And so these guys, like, they loved me. If you ever want to know how to like make friends in business, make people money.
Yeah.
And they were like, what else you got? And I was like, well, I have this 3-year thing that's licensing, which shows you everything else about how to run a gym, not just getting clients in the door, but like how I structure semi-privates, how I do high ticket stuff, how I run the class more efficiently, like my whole model, not just the front end. And that's when the word of mouth just went nuts.
And what year was this? This is 2016.
So December 16 is when I lost everything for the second time. Okay. And this is now like April-ish of 2017. So all of this happens in like 4 or 5 months. Mind you, the period where I just went to go see Layla's parents, my mother had just got admitted to the hospital, and I had gotten in a DUI head-on collision also in that same time period.
Oh, wow.
Rough spot. But here we are, April-ish. And then it just took off like a rocket. We did 480 the next month, then 780, then 1 million, then 1.2, then 1.5, then 1.8, then 2, then 2.2, then 2.4, and we kept going
per month.
Per month. And so the first full calendar year we did 26 million top line, 17 million in take home, and I had been looking at bankruptcy lawyers 18 months earlier.
Wow.
And that like 18 months before that.
And this is selling the blueprint to how to run a gym from start to finish.
Yeah, we turned into it was basically just a licensing program. So we just licensed because what we would do is we would test out ads in every market. And so I'd spend like 50 grand testing ads in 10 or 20 representative markets, find the winners, and we already had the back end system down. So we would basically just license these winning ads, because one of the most expensive things when you're running a local business is ads that don't work.
Yes.
And so if every one of them is just like a home run ad, then you just print. And that we already had the money printing system. We just needed to make sure that they had leads. And so that's what we did. And so it was incredibly high margin. Very high margin.
Yeah.
And so that was, and that was when you talk about like, what was the big clicking point, getting my first gyms to start working. I made some money. And then I went up into a higher leverage business, vehicle, which, licensing and media just has higher margins than brick and mortar stores. Not that there's anything wrong with brick and mortar stores, because you get really good returns on capital there. Like we're heavily invested in chains, because I like brick and mortar. I love the model. But when we did this, it took off. And then, the next year we grew more and we started a supplement line, and that did like 20 its first year. Because we sold through this distribution base of gyms, because I had a supplement selling system, because I knew how to sell supplements in gyms because I did it. And so it was just, when I had that rock bottom moment, or which one? When I had the moment where I was like, I just lost everything, I hadn't lost the skills and the education that I had learned in that process. Yes. And so that was the thing that was valuable. And so that was a really good perspective shift for like, and I should have known better, because, my father's Iranian, and so he fled during the revolution. And he was always big on education, which most immigrant parents are. And he always said this to me, and I still take it with me, he said, education is the only thing that no one can tax you out of, you can't lose in a divorce, and the government can't take it from you. And because we had everything obviously confiscated, because that's how the revolution works, by the way. Yeah. They're like, that's not your house, that's our house. That's not your money, that's our money. And so he had nothing, you know what I mean, when he came here. And so, but he was a doctor. Yes. And so he was able to start anew in the US without being able to speak English. Again, that kind of empathy thing of, I think what my dad was able to do in the US coming much later in life, not even being able to speak the language. And then, becoming a doctor, and he started his own private practice, in some ways is more impressive than, what we've been able to accomplish, because we got that head start. And so, again, child of luck. But that was the Gym Watch story.
Wow. Wow. That's an incredibly powerful story, because there are so many lessons in there. And I think something that's so important about that, and you kind of touched on it, is that if you go through this kind of process and ups and downs, you develop both a skill set and a mentality that you simply cannot shortcut your way through. Right? And it's interesting because you were forced to innovate many times, right? Like if it were not for these, it sucks that these financial situations happen. Like that sucks, man. Like I can't even imagine that. Like I've taken some L's before, but like that completely sucks, to be going from doing well to being broke, to doing well, to being broke again, right? And then you've got this pressure, and okay, I need to come up talk about pressure. Okay, I need to come up with 150 grand in the next 30 days.
Profit.
Anyone listening, imagine putting yourself in that situation. You've got 30 days to make 100, like your mind is going to be like spinning. Like every single tactic, angle, skill set you have, it's like, all right, I need to find a way to make this happen. And you made it happen. And without that type of pressure, I don't know, like the pressure forces the innovation. So as much as it sucks, it's powerful. And with everything that you go on and do now and in the future, you've got that. It can't be taken away. It can't be taken from you. I mean, if you see some of the ways that, you know what I mean? Like, I love to see people have success in anything now, right? But now in this age of the internet, we do live in a time where there are some kind of quick and easy ways to make a lot of money that, yes, they require you pulling the trigger and being proactive, but there's also some luck in there, right? You throw $1,000 into some meme crypto coin, right? And it blows up and you've turned your 1,000 into a couple million and you sell and awesome, you've made a few million. The problem with that is you didn't really learn anything, right? So if you were to lose that money and go back to where you were, if you've built up a business or you've got a skill set, you're a doctor, or you're whatever it is, you know you can build back up from zero. But in those type of situations, you're a little bit screwed because you didn't put in that time and effort and develop those skills. And maybe you can get lucky again, and you might find the next one that's going to do 1,000x or a 10,000x, but maybe you can't. So I think that's incredibly powerful. What I do want to ask you is, from a mental perspective and also from a relationship perspective, because there's a lot of people here. I do want to talk about how you met your wife and everything like that, but managing all these relationships, both professionally and personally, and then dealing with your own stuff mentally, what was that actually like to go through? Because it's cool to hear the story, but I mean, what was even going on in your mind? What was that pressure like?
It was tough. Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was tough enough that, I was drinking like a half a bottle of Johnny Walker Black every night, during most of that early gym when we were doing the turnarounds. And the thing is, and I feel like I can say this pretty confidently. Like, I wasn't an alcoholic, and it didn't affect my performance in terms of, like, I still showed up and I still sold every day, and it was what it was. But I drank to basically like decrease the noise in my head because I felt so much pressure. It was like I felt like I could take my first breath of the day after I had like a massive, half a bottle of that stuff. And that obviously, the pressure eventually led to, me, getting the collision, driving back from a family event, ironically. And what was interesting for me, and that, mind you, that's not when I didn't stop drinking after that. Because again, like, I still felt honestly that it wasn't really an issue. But I had a coach, like a performance coach at the time. And after I walked away from the accident. If you saw pictures of it, it was 60 miles an hour, and I walked away, head-on collision. And he was like, "Alex, your stress is going to kill you." He's like, "And you now see this." And his big thing was basically like conversations unsaid, which is like, you have all this attention that's spread between these things because you aren't willing to look at them. Like, you avoid these things, you avoid these hard conversations. And so at this time, I was so spread thin. I actually asked Layla to just go away basically for a month. And so we still talked, but we were like on a break. And she basically came in one day and was like, "Do you still want to be with me?" And I was like, "No, you can do whatever you want." And so she went and launched the gym in Hawaii. We actually need it, and she crushed it. She still has the all-time record from that launch. And at this time, I had 9 businesses.
Okay.
Because I was the classic like shiny object entrepreneur, and so I had partners. I had all this stuff, and I had a dental agency.
Oh, okay.
A chiropractor agency. I had 5 locations. I had the 6th, which I was now spending my days in, and then I had the launch business. So I had like no mental bandwidth whatsoever. And mind you, like, I'm still not really making any money. I'm making revenue and just spending it. Like, I'm not making anything. And so the thing that really helped me get through that was after I did get in that DUI, in that collision, I think stakes became really clear to me, which was that I didn't die. And if I didn't die, then everything that I looked at was framed through the image of like, will it kill me? And so then all of a sudden, like the next day, I called all of these partners and was like, "Can't do business." And they were like, "But you said," and I was like, "Can't do it. Sorry." And I was usually the breadwinner for, I was the rainmaker for most of the businesses that I was part of. And I was like, I'll do whatever deal you want. I was like, but I'm not doing it. And so I exited all of those businesses within the next like 48 hours.
What was your role in those businesses, like the dental and the chiropractor?
Marketer.
Okay.
Yeah, marketing and sales. That was always my game. And so I just stepped out of everything. And that was when Layla was like, we should do this launch thing. It's actually working. So that's like concurrently going on. But from a pressure perspective, the thing that, the perspectives that have shaped my life have since then been all framed around death. And that's been kind of my single point of absolute truth is that like, I am going to die. And so if I look at things from that perspective, it just helps me get out of the day-to-day expectations management of other people, because I lived the first part of my life, more than half of my life, with the, choked by the expectations that I perceived of other people. And so I would say that probably the second half of my life has been just a slow and deliberate process of trying to disengage as many of those as I can so that I can just hear the one voice that matters most, which for me is mine, and trying to meet that man or the ideal version of myself's expectations. So I think about like my 85-year-old self and I'm like, what does he want me to do? And so I'm like, does he care about what this person thinks? I'm like, he said that person didn't even show up to your funeral. Okay, well, if they're not going to be at the funeral, why do I care about what they think today? And so I use that frame a lot. And that's what actually gets me. It allows me to get out of a lot of social, like perceived social constructs and expectations people want to put on you, or at least that you perceive that they're putting on you. And then you can just make decisions that make sense. And so I think that was my big unlock from that little season. And then that allowed me to I got all my attention back. And then that's when, I had that little breakthrough a few months later, and then that was it.
When you are 85 years old and you're looking back on your life, what do you want that legacy to be?
So I would say internally and externally. So internally, it's that I leave no potential unused. So I think everybody has an idea of what their potential is. And so I just want no potential Alex left. I want all of it actualized. Every ounce of it squeezed out.
Why?
Because I find that meaningful.
Okay.
I won't get into the meaning conversation, but for me, I find that meaningful. And then from an external perspective, the more I've thought about it, like I'm a big believer in what Socrates said, that ignorance is the only evil, just not knowing. So it's like people are mean to one another because they don't understand one another. Like if they really understood the other person, then they wouldn't. And everyone's seen these TV shows where people hate each other. They find out more about one another, and all of a sudden they're actually fine with each other. Yeah. And so it's just people lack context. And so I see, the opposite of ignorance is knowledge or education. And so, our mission acquisition.com is to make real business education available to everyone. And so that's why we write the books and why we make the courses, because like that education is what allowed me to lose everything and then still get it back. And if you play out different scenarios, like if you accumulate all this wealth and then you pass it on to a generation and they don't have the same education as you, and then you pass it on to more generations, they lose it all because they don't know how it was made. And so all of it, like we're here with like cameras and recording items, and we're able to do it because other humans who we don't know figured something out and they passed it on. And so it's very much like Newton's, I can see so far because I stand on shoulders of giants. And I know that in 5,000 or 5 million years, like my name will definitely be forgotten, but I can still help humanity by having some level of contribution from an educational perspective. And so from an external impact, education, I think, is the greatest legacy, because it's the only thing that, like, if you have kids and they lose all your money, but they have all your education, they can get it back. And then from like a combating evil perspective, if everyone had complete understanding of one another and of the world, which only comes through knowledge and education, then I think a great amount of evil would be avoided. And so that's what I think my 85-year-old self, I see myself, and it sucks to say this, because I don't know how to say it in a good way, but I really enjoy teaching. And or rather, if I was to be precise, I enjoy instructing. As in, teaching is organizing the environment to reward or punish for behaviors. I don't do that. But instruct is in like, if these are the things and how I do them that have worked for me, use them if you want. That is something that I really deeply enjoy. Like right before I came here, I spent the entire day redrawing images for the next book that's coming out,
Mm.
just so that they're like a little crisper and a little clearer. And there's no thing that I enjoy more in my life. Like if I did only that for the rest of my life, like I'd be stoked. And so that's what I love most. And I think if my 85-year-old self saw me do that for the highest percentage of my life possible, you'd be pretty happy too.
That's awesome, man. That's powerful. I think something really interesting about the time we're living in is there's something you said there which brought a thought to mind, which is you said in 5,000 years or whatever, you know, people aren't gonna know your name.
Yeah.
That might not be the case. I think, you know, something that's so interesting, and I don't think most people don't think about this or talk about it, which is that we actually, due to technology, we now live in the first ever time in human history where the things that you create and put out there beyond, say, a written manuscript can exist forever and be accessed by everybody all over the world, right? This podcast we are recording right now, this conversation, in 5,000 years, people can come back and not just listen to the conversation, they can watch us. All the videos you put out on YouTube, all the clips, all the long form stuff, that was never, ever true. I mean, if you go back, I don't know exactly what year photography, let alone videography was invented, but I mean, we don't know exactly what all these historical figures look like, right? Because there was no photography. Right. There were definitely no video cameras. Yeah. We can't hear their voices. There's no recordings of them. I mean, maybe the earliest you can go back is to maybe, when was photography invented? I don't know, late 1800s, early 1900s, something like that, right? But it's only been, let's say, 150 or so years where you could even see an image of someone. Before that, it's statues, it's paintings. We've got an idea of what these people look like, but we can't go, oh, let's watch a video of this guy. And I think it's actually so fascinating that we now live in a time where everything we are now creating, our great grandchildren can go and be, I don't even know what my great grandfather looked like, right? Yeah. But they can go back and be like, oh, okay, this is him. This is his video. These are his videos. This is voices. We've got
here's like all TikTok reels.
Right. And I think that's actually, it's kind of scary in a way. It's a little bit scary in a way. But I think that's incredibly powerful because we've already got this stack of human knowledge, but I think it's just going to be exponential now. All of this, all these videos people are putting out, all their tweets, all their posts, all that everything. I'm like, it's kind of scary that it's going to live on forever. So, be careful of what you post. But it is going to. And I do wonder how that's going to sort of bear out for humanity. Because I often say that in this modern era, we only have two advantages. Human nature hasn't fundamentally changed over the centuries. The two advantages we have over our ancestors is we have better technology and we have access to the past. That's it. Really. We're not, we're the same human beings as people were 500 years ago. That's kind of all we've got. So if we choose to use that to our advantage rather than to our destruction, then I think that's how we move forward. Right now, we seem to be doing a little bit of both. But human nature doesn't change. That's why you can go back and read a book written 2,000 years ago, and the life lessons are as applicable today, whether you're reading the Bible or you're reading Marcus Aurelius. It's like, oh, it sounds like this could have been written last week because it doesn't change. It's the same lessons. Humans have the same flaws. We're prone to the same, silly thinking, same cognitive problems. We have the same survival needs. We need food. We need water. It doesn't change. And I think that we think that we're changing and we think that we're so advanced and whatever. And I'm like, no, we've just got better stuff. It's kind of it. We're not, the people in the 1920s were the same. The people in the 1820s were the same. They just didn't have as much history and they didn't have as much stuff.
No air conditioning, no Wi-Fi.
Basically. Pretty much. Yeah.
It is interesting because I think a lot about how, the poorest people today live better than, Louis the whatever, the royalty of a long era ago. That always tricks me out. And also that those people are still just as unhappy and happy as the people are today. And so, I mean, none of this is new stuff, that more stuff isn't going to satisfy us. And I think that like when we die, or at least for me, like I'll probably be equally satisfied and dissatisfied as I am today. Because the thing is like I've accomplished things that I said would make me happy years ago. So I already know that that's a false premise. And so I have and anyway, going on a tangent here, but I had this mentor early on, and I had a particularly good weekend. I saw some people I liked, did stuff that was fun for me. And I came in just like kind of a little bit upbeat. And I told her that, and she said, I'm pretty sure that's the secret to living a good life is putting as many of those days in a row as you can.
Mm.
And it was actually like it operationalized joy for me, which is like, okay, doing things that I like with people that I like as many times in a row as I can.
I've never heard someone say operationalized joy.
Yeah.
I was like, this man's a true entrepreneur.
Well, it's just because like a lot of it's like these amorphous words, and we're like, what do they mean? It's like, well, how do I make that real?
Mm.
And so for me, that was that. And so that's what I spent a lot of time on. And even today, because we get a lot of time, I'm sure you get lots of people pulling on your time,
course,
right?
Yeah.
And one of our teammates, our director of people, made a presentation on how it takes about 80 hours to make a friend, like a true friend.
Okay.
And that was actually really profound for me in a different way. More so because now I just think to myself, if I'm about to take a lunch with someone, am I going to spend 80 hours with them? If the answer is no, it's giving me an easier way to say no.
Mm.
Just like, I don't think I'm going to spend 80 hours with this person. Okay. I'd rather spend it with friends. Not to say that I'd never take, new meetings, but it's given me a nice lens to say no, which I try and do as much as I can.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned your wife or previous girlfriend, now wife, multiple times throughout this podcast. I'd like to learn more.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
So we met on Bumble, which is the dating app. It was the best one then. So I don't know what the kids are doing these days, but it was where all the best talent was.
You don't want to know what the kids are doing these days.
I don't want to know. Yeah, it was where all the talent was. And so anyways, we it's kind of a funny story. So I called her up because for me, my game plan was always like get the phone number as fast as I could so that I could get off the app. And so I called her up and set a frozen yogurt date. Because I said, hey, it's low commitment, right? If we don't like each other, we can dip in 10 minutes. And she tried to cancel on me the day before the date. And so I called her up and I was like, you're not canceling. I just said no. I just refused her request to cancel. And so she ended up, she showed up for the frozen yogurt thing. And we immediately just started talking about business. And that was like, awesome, because it was all I cared about was business. Yeah. And so I felt like all my other dates, I always had to like pretend to be interested in what they were interested in. And so this date, I just got to talk about stuff I was interested in. She was interested in that stuff too. And so we spent like 4 hours on our first date only talking about business. Mm. And at the end of the date, I said, hey, I don't know if this is going to work out, but you should totally work for me. And so I offered her a job, and I was like, I'm going to do this new thing. I'm going to call it Gym Launch. I'm like, go around. It was right at the time. I was like, I'm going to go around the country and launch these gyms. And so she said, no, I literally just met you. Like she had a whole book of business as a personal trainer. And so, but anyways, I went and I did my first launches and I came back and I hadn't processed any of the money because I can do the talking thing. So I did that, got all the credit cards, got them all signed, and then I'd have the next person. So I hadn't processed any of it. And so she picked me up from the airport like a month or so later. And we'd spoken every night, and I was like, I went 21 for 23 today. I went 18 for 21, like whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And she said, you need to take me on a date because you promised you're going to take me somewhere that wasn't Chipotle, Panda Express, and I was like, we're eating together. What else is there? And so anyways, I said yes. I said, can you do one favor for me first? And she's like, what? I was like, I just need you to help me process these contracts. And so I got back and I had this fat stack of contracts. And so I taught her how to process them. In like an hour, we processed like $100 and something thousand. And she can do math. She looked at it and she was like, what is this? And I was like, this is the thing I was telling you about. And then she's like, is it legal? That was her first question. Is it legal? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, all right, I'm in.
That's so funny.
And so she quit her job. And so when we started, so I only did the first 2 or 3 launches on my own. And then Layla came with me. Mm-hmm. So anytime there was a launch where it was just one, it would be both of us. And if we had 2, she would fly to that one and we'd talk every night. And that was basically our early days. So we went from like, we just met to traveling the nation, living out of the one room motel room together within like 6 weeks. And so you can imagine this. So this is a little bit of the context of when I went back to see her family. Yeah. They're like, so this is the guy that you met on the internet and then 6 weeks later dropped everything for and are sleeping in a motel room, Middle Eastern father, hers.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah. So huge fan of mine, right? Right. When I came back, I had no money either. So I'd lost everything too. But like when she met me, I was a successful 5-location gym owner. Mm-hmm. But anyways, we started doing this, and that's when we met in April of 16.
Okay.
And so if you remember the chronology there, we met in April 16. I did the first launches. Then we did launches together. I opened that 6th location with that guy in August, which I crushed that launch at 370 plus sales. And then then I sold the gyms, and then I put all the money into that account. Then he emptied the money from that account. And then I got my DUI. And then got my DUI. My mom went to the hospital. And then we lost. I had to close that gym down, drained my bank account for the most part, then had the processing issue, then launched all the gyms, and then had the chargeback and refund issue with them doing everything. And then it started to work. And so that was the first 12 months of our relationship.
Wow.
And so after it, like things, quote, turned around, which was like May, like 2 months later, things were, but like what's crazy though is that like 2 months after that, we were taking home we took home like $300,000 in personal income, like 2 months after that. So I remember looking at her the month after that when I had $100,000 saved up after having nothing again. And that was like one of the most significant moments in my personal life, because up to that point, even with the gyms, I always left the money in the business account. So it never felt like it was mine. It was always like, yeah, that's going to be for the next location or whatever. And this was the first time I had $100,000 in my personal account. And I remember like being in the kitchen with her and like pulling it up and like getting really choked up because I couldn't even like say it because it had been such a goal for such a long time. I mean, mind you, like for everyone who's listening, it was 6 years, you know what I mean? Or whatever it was, 5 or 6 years. And it was tough 5 or 6 years. And she came over and she like dropped everything while she was cooking, and then she just like gave me a hug, and I just like wilted in her hands because it felt like we had made it. And I still to this day don't think I've ever felt as rich as I did in that moment, because, and I think about it a lot because the relative change in income was like 100x. You know what I mean? I went from 1,000 to 100,000. Like I don't think I'll ever have 100x change in personal net, like ever again. And I remember like after I caught my breath or whatever, I was like, we can screw up. There we go. For the next 3 years, and we'll be okay. Yeah. Because for me, we were living together on $30,000 a year, both of us, and so I knew that I was like, we're good. And then obviously the next month we made more and more. But like that moment, I felt like I could exhale finally. And then that I proposed to her 2 months later, and my proposition was in the same style of. I walked in one day, our employees were worried because we were dating and running this business that was growing really fast. And they were like, what happens if you guys break up? And I was like, it's a good point. I understand their concerns. And so I just went to Layla and I said, I have to handle something. We're going to take a detour in the story. I had a fiance before this, and we had kind of left things like open loop, you know what I mean? Like maybe in the future. And so I was like, I need to like close this loop. And so I said, I'm going to go fly back to see my fiance and kind of close things off. She took that as us breaking up.
Oh, gosh.
So she flew back home.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And we came back, 2 days later together, and we were at that point in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I came in with flowers, and I was like, these are for you. And she was like, okay. I was like, so I've been thinking, I think it would make sense. I think the exact words I said is, I think it would make sense if we got married.
Fellas listening, this is the line right there from Alex Hormozi.
I didn't have a ring. I didn't do the one knee down thing. I will say I probably surprised her. And so, I handed her the flowers, said, I think it would make sense if we got married. And then she like looked at me and I was like, well, what do you think? And she was like, I mean, I guess so. And I was like, okay, well then I guess we need to go get you a ring. And so I was like, well, there's a jewelry store around the corner. I was like, you want to go there? And so we got in the car, went to the jewelry store. We looked at a bunch, and she was like, I like that one. I was like, I like that one too. And so we bought it in 10 minutes, and then went back to the apartment. And I was like, I guess we have to do the church thing. And so I called up the church, and the pastor was like, are you sure, son? Like I was like, are you free Wednesday? And he was like, yeah. It was 6 days from that point. Yeah. I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. And so we worked that day, that Wednesday. And then after work, we went to the church. We got married with no one, no family.
Wow.
Didn't tell anybody. because
Oh.
we thought our parents would disagree with it because they'd say, you guys are moving too fast. You're being so irrational, blah, blah, blah. But we were both like, we're doing this for us. It's not about them. And so we got married. We showed up to work the next day, told the staff, we're like, hey, you're good. All your concerns have been accounted for. We are married, so you don't have to worry about that anymore. And they were like, what? And so that was it. And so we got engaged and married in 6 days, and then been rocking and rolling since.
Wow. That's a heck of a story right there. I do have to ask, what was the response when you eventually told your respective parents?
They weren't pumped about it. I'll say that. Yeah, my dad was not happy about it. So this is another random story, but I went back home for something, and my dad threw a surprise wedding, kind of.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it wasn't a wedding though, because there was no vows or dresses or anything, and so it was just like a dinner. So it's kind of like a surprise reception.
Okay.
But it was only his friends.
Okay.
So there's a bunch of people I didn't know.
Ah.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
it was an odd experience.
Okay.
And so that was my dad's taking it. My mom found out over the phone, whatever, and then I do remember her parents. That was the funniest. So we FaceTimed her dad. This is so funny. So we FaceTimed her dad, and he picks up. He's like, "Hey, sweetie," and I'm like, "Hey, I'm in the in this thing too." And she was like, "I've got an announcement." And so she shows her ring, right? And they were like, "Oh, congratulations," And then she was like, "And we got married." And then it was silence.
Oh boy.
It was the silence was so long that I stepped in on the phone and was like, "Dr. Kurosh," I was like, "Nobody died." That was my first line after the silence was, "Nobody died. There's no funerals. Everyone's okay. Like, it's all good."
Mm-hmm.
We spent 13 months together from beginning to end. We've been through a ton, and like, it's all good. And yeah, that was how both parents found out. And then what was interesting though is that we had to go back and we spent like 6 weeks. I had a nice place at this point that I was renting out. I had a tenant, and so we had gone to Puerto Rico and then to try and do tax stuff, which didn't work out because 4 days later Hurricane Maria hit. If you remember that, it decimated the entire island.
Yeah.
So 4 days after we moved to Puerto Rico, the biggest hurricane in 90 years hit. It destroyed everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so Layla was like, "I don't want to live there." And so we basically were homeless, but now we were making more than her parents' house every week. And so I went back now. It was kind of a cool 360 of like 2 years earlier. And so now we're staying at her parents' house in the same room. And I spent like 6 weeks with them. And so then, her dad and I have been close since. Like,
yeah.
He's great. He helps me with my books. Like, we're thick as thieves.
Awesome.
But that was they're like, "Okay, this guy's not so bad."
just showed up from the internet and just snatched my daughter, and then.
But to piggyback real quickly, Layla is the reason that I'm here.
Mm.
Like, all of the success that I've had has been in part or 100% due to her. Like, a lot of the early days, I made my gyms relatively successful, but not super successful. And it was only when I met her, because she is like kind of the yin to my yang. She's like got a massive heart. She really is so good at judging people. She's never been wrong about like the partner. She was like, "I wouldn't do business with this guy." And I was like, "What do you know? I'm the entrepreneur." And she was right. And the amount of times that we've had like actual crooks try and steal money from us and then later get indicted, like true, like actual like criminals. Yeah. And she will get like halfway through a process. She's like, "I don't know. Something's off." Like it's happened 3 times in the last like few years. And she just has like an amazing people picker. Mm-hmm. And so she can build an infrastructure of people around anything. And so I've always been able to like outsell and outmarket any company I had. But until I met Layla, I couldn't do anything about it. Mm. And then she came in and was able to just organize people. And she's been, it depends on how you define CEO, but like she is the CEO of all the things that we do, like her title is CEO at acquisition.com. I'm founder. I'm just like random guy who shows up on stuff. But she, like I have one direct report. She has many.
Yeah.
And so it's been because of her. Like I couldn't, a lot of people try and pay lip service to like boost their wife up. Like it's not that. And I would just always get the credit because I'm a guy. But like Layla's a vicious entrepreneur. I mean, she was a successful personal trainer. She was making more money, before we met. And since then we've fully integrated our lives. So we live life together. So we both wake up and work all day, and we work out, and we eat dinner. Like we spend all of the day pretty much together, and we've been doing that since. And if you think about like marriage stats, it's kind of funny. I think it's the average couple spends, I think 2 hours a day together. And like 45 minutes of that is watching television, 45 minutes of that is eating. And then there's like 30 actual minutes of like time.
Wow.
Yeah. And
It's 2 hours. That's U.S. statistics.
Yeah.
It does. It's crazy because it sounds crazy, but then I think of how most people live their lives, and people spend 8 to 10 hours at work or on the way to it.
Yep.
And then, especially if they've got children in the picture, whatever. Yeah. It sounds shocking, but actually, if you think about it, it's not surprising.
And so Layla and I, by the math, have been married for 50 years. So we spent a lot of time together. Yeah. And it's been good.
That's dope, man. I mean, it's such an unorthodox story, but it's also very beautiful, right? It's extremely romantic whilst being extremely unromantic.
So I remember I was engaged before this, and wonderful woman, wonderful family, everything was awesome. And being a sensible person, I was talking to her sisters and was like, "Hey, I'm planning on proposing," and they're like, "Well, what's your plan?" I was like, "Well, the plan is we're going to go grocery shopping, and then I will just like propose there," because my whole angle was, this is what life's going to look like, not the flowers and I was like, this is life, and so if you want to do this with me, like, I'm game. And her sister heard that story and was like, "Yeah, it's a terrible idea. This is not about you. This is about her, and she wants all these things." And so I did a whole the classic song and dance, the whole thing. And I think that for me, the way that Layla and I's story has panned out is the way I want it to pan out. Because like, to your point of like, it's maybe romantic, it's not romantic for some people, but it's like, it's ours. Yeah. And so that's my vibe. And
it's funny because it's not it's romantic in an unorthodox way.
Yeah.
But if you think about the things that are, I'm not married yet, but if I think about the things that are genuinely important in a marriage and in a relationship, and just that everyday stuff, spending times together, going through the ups and downs, taking the L's, getting the wins together, all that stuff. I mean, that's kind of what it is. All this stuff of, fancy this and, the just all the song and dance, the whole Disney kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, cool. Like people do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then I think in the Western society in particular, and not even just Western, honestly, like globally, because of the kind of commercialization of a lot of it, there's so much focus on the wedding.
Yeah.
But not the marriage.
Totally.
Just in what I see in many people's relationships, it's all this one day of like pomp and grandeur and spending tens or hundreds of thousands. And then it's like, okay, well, what about the rest of it? And people aren't thinking that. I mean, if you're spending only 2 hours a day with a person, I'm like, that explains a lot of the other marriage statistics to me. Yeah. I'm like, 2 hours, that's nothing. And I get that people's lives are structured in such a way, this person's got a day job, that person's got a day job, and they're apart for so long. But it's, even though that's normal, when you really think about it, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
That you're spending what you spend 10 hours at work or on your way to work in some office, say. And your spouse is also doing the same. You're over there. They're over there. You're literally spending more time with your coworkers and with your boss and whatever than you are with the person you're married to. And then you get home and you're tired. And maybe people fight and they just, you know what I mean? Because they're stressed out from the work. And I'm like, that's, as an entrepreneur myself, even though, I'm not married yet, but I like to talk to people who are and learn from them, because so much of what I'm doing now and the way I'm trying to position things is to think towards that future of being married and having a family and everything. And I don't want to be a husband and a father who's not there because I'm forced to be kind of going into something. So I'm like, let me set stuff up now so that I will have that flexibility. Yeah, sometimes, I might have to go on a trip, I might have to travel there or whatever, but I want it to be on my accord. I don't want it to be because, I have to do this or I have to do that and I have to be away from my kids. I have to be away from my wife. So I think the way that's worked out, even though it sounds unorthodox to people, right? Even the running a business together. A lot of people are told, don't run a business together with your spouse or whatever. Although I've actually heard that is the opposite of what is correct. I've actually heard that couples who do run businesses together,
if you make $1 together in a business, you have a 90% likelihood of not getting divorced.
Is that an actual statistic?
Divorce rates among people. Divorce rates among people who have made $1 together in business together is 10%.
That's incredible. That's incredible. What's that from? Do you know the source of it?
It's definitely Googleable.
I would love to repeat. I want this stat. I want this stat, especially when I'm hearing all these other ones.
100%.
That's powerful. Let me ask, because a lot of young men do listen to you. I'm sure you've been asked, we do live in a time and an era and in a place where there's a lot of new challenges for young men and women out there. There's a lot of challenges. A lot of men both men and women, I think, are operating from a position of fear in many cases, right? Literally fear of the opposite sex, but also fear of marriage, fear of commitment, fear of having kids, fear of doing this, fear of doing that, fear of judgment. What's the best way to phrase this? Let's be specific. For a young man who is out there, who is looking for a relationship, a wife, someone to spend their life with and to create their future with, what type of advice would you give to that man, whether he's in his 20s, he's in his 30s, whatever, but he's aware of all the madness going on in the world, he's concerned about this, concerned about that, doesn't really know his position when it comes to the wife part in particular? What would you suggest to that man? Because I saw you did a post on Twitter about this recently. So I'd love for you to expand on it.
So 3 things. One is check your stats. And so what I mean by that is, if this person came into your life, what happened to your stats? Did you get in better shape or worse shape? Did you start making more money or less money? Is this person trying to take you from the things that you want to do, or is it trying to encourage you to do the things that you want to do? That's number one. Like all my stats had to go up. Like that coach that I was talking about, I was debating whether I should, stay with, at that point I was to stay with Layla, because it was during that break where she was going to come back, and he was like, check your stats. And when I thought about it, I was like, well, shoot, she's in shape and she works out and she eats well. And so I've been doing better about that. And, she doesn't drink like I drink, so that's probably good. I'm making more money than I did before. So like all these things, I was like, well, yeah, I guess my stats have gone up. And that was actually, as silly as that sounds, that was like a huge point for me. And then we got back together. The second one is you want somebody, in my opinion, who believes in you, who believes in your dreams even more than you do. Because I'm a big believer that you should only listen to somebody or take advice from people who have bigger dreams for your life than you do. And I think most people don't have bigger dreams for you, which just means that for me, like their advice is invalid. And so you want someone who really believes. And I think that Layla always believed. Really, when when it was definitely faith, there was not a lot of evidence. You know what I mean? Like she believed. And I think that like in the dark times that you will inevitably have in life, like having someone who believes in you is just everything. It can be everything. The third one, I had it in my head and then I lost it. It was what I said in the tweet. I'm trying to remember what it was.
Yeah. So you've got check your stats.
Yeah.
Have someone who believes in you even more than you do.
And the last one is, so the Bible talks about this, and I wanted to just get any ancient wisdom around getting married. And right after Layla and I got married, we went through all the divorce stuff so that we could understand why people get divorced. And so we went through all of these marriage retreats that are meant for like crisis marriages.
You went to them? You attended
we went
them?
through we went through like the materials.
Okay,
We bought the
gotcha.
workbooks and watched the
gotcha,
seminars.
gotcha.
And it was super helpful for us. There was a great one. It's a Christian thing, even if you're not faith-based. I'm not. It was called Love and Respect. And it was basically talking about how like men have different needs than women do. Men need respect, women tend to need love. And so talking like in those terms was really helpful for us. And I think in a lot of ways, just validated how we had set up our relationship. But the only line in the Bible about picking a mate, not being married, there's tons of stuff on being married, but only one on picking. And it was pick someone you go to war with.
Mm.
And when I think about that, I'd thought about it before we did get married, and like she was somebody who had gone through war with me. You know what I mean? And when she went to Hawaii, which is when we did that launch, when we split up, right, or went on a break, whatever. When she did that, think about it from her perspective for a second. So she met this guy on the internet. 4 weeks later, he flashes some money. She quits her job, which she had a good career. Starts flying around the country. As soon as she starts flying around the country, meets a partner, she disagrees with it, opens up more businesses. I thought I quit to do this thing with you, but now you're doing lots of things. Then says, I don't think I want to do this anymore. And then at that point, when you're living in a motel with this dude who says he doesn't want to be with you, you then fly to Hawaii and still make him money.
Mm.
And so like when my world was crumbling at that point, like Layla stood tall and she crushed it. Like she didn't just like do okay. She broke and set the record to this day for a single launch location.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, to me, when she came back and I had some space, I'd finished this partnership, you know, I'd cleaned up some of my personal space. It was like when the chips were down, and not everyone can be that lucky where you get to like see someone go test, you know what I mean? That kind of thing. It's kind of like you can say you're loyal, but until you have the opportunity to cheat, you aren't anything.
Yes.
Like you need evidence to claim the trait.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Layla's tough as nails. And so when she did that and came back, and that was all the money that I needed to like try yet again and then fail.
Only temporarily.
Yeah, right. For my next temporary success leading only to failure. That was just like she was somebody that I would go to war with. And you know, the last thing that I'll add to this is, again, I want to put the big giant disclaimer here, which is like, this is just what worked for us. Do whatever you want. There are no shoulds. Live your life. You don't have to get married. I believe, like, I'm not even like pro marriage. I'm just pro my marriage. Like I see most marriages, I'm like, I wouldn't want that. You know what I mean? So I, as an institution, not the biggest fan. We talked about what it would look like for us to split up. What would we do about the business? And we both agreed. And even to this day, nothing would really change. I would just live somewhere else and we'd still do business together because we enjoy doing business together. And so I get questions from guys who are like, how do I get my girl to like whatever? And I'm like, you're not. Mm-hmm. She always liked it. You're not going to change the person. And so one of the things that I loved about Layla was that up front, she said, I'm never going to try and change you. And to me, that was very freeing because like, I'm weird in my own ways. You know what I mean? And almost like that little microcosm of that story with the proposal.
Yeah.
And mind you, lovely family, lovely people, awesome. Mm-hmm. But it was just pure acceptance. And so I think that like if you can find somebody who just accepts you, like truly, isn't like, hey, you should dress this way, or hey, you should cut your hair like this, or hey, like because like there's big implications in that statement. It's, I don't care what you want for you. I want you to look like this for me. Now, you could make the argument, well, I'm the one who looks at you all day and you want me to be attracted to you, et cetera. But like, in my opinion, again, one man's 2 cents, is that you should be attracted, should is a strong word, is that I think it works better if you are attracted to that person's natural state. Because if the way they act, the way they dress, the way they are is someone that you are attracted to, then I think that's the game. I think you've won. And so I'm a big believer in, Layla and I call it loving logically, which is counter to all the Hollywood stuff. But like we talked about, like, okay, well, what happens if we get divorced? What happens with the business? How are we going to do that? And I was like, we're just going to keep running. It's like, okay, cool. Layla and I have had one argument, and it wasn't like a screamer match. It was just like, she really didn't want me to do this business thing, and I really wanted to do it. And I steamrolled her and I did it. Yeah. And it was the wrong call. It was the wrong call. Yeah, it was the wrong call. And she was right. But you know what? She's never once brought it up.
That's dope.
Yeah, she's never once been that way. And so I got a piece of advice from a pastor about it. And he said something to us that was really helpful. He said, if you don't agree, don't move forward. And we've actually stuck with that. So people are like, what happens when it's a 50-50? It's like you keep fucking working. Sorry. You keep working on it.
Yeah.
You keep working on it. And eventually you come up with a solution, that works for both. You compromise if you need to. But I'm a big believer in if you have the same information, you should make the same decision. And so if we don't agree on something, the first thing we usually say is, what information are you working off of?
Yeah.
Which means that I have an incomplete data set compared to yours. And so then we share info rather than like arguing. It's like, oh, hold on, what are you thinking about? And like sometimes she's like, oh, what about this employee might take it? I was like, that's a great point. Didn't think about that. Good call. Or sometimes I have something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But loving logically in that, like, I think arranged marriages they have higher
success rate
significantly. And I think it's a combination of two things. One is low expectations. Second is high commitment. So like, if you define a successful marriage as one that does not break, which is not, it's a low bar, but at least it keeps you married, right? I don't think Layla and I had huge expectations. Both of us weren't like planning on getting married. And if anything, I was getting out of like a fiance thing. And when we met, I said, I'm not interested in anything long-term. Like, I was like, I'm living life. And if you want to live it with me, you can. And so our dates, we hung out every day after that first date was, I'm working all day. If you want to work next to me, cool. And so that's how our quote dates work.
I think just that in itself is very powerful. Just enjoying being in someone's presence.
Yeah.
Even if you're not like entertaining one another or in date mode or whatever, like just liking, hey, I'm working. You know what? I like you just being there.
Yeah.
I think that in itself says a lot.
And I'll give you my last one because I know I just gave a bunch of them.
No, dude, this is great right here. This is great.
I think 3 pieces, and they're actually the same as they are with business, is that you want someone with aligned mission, aligned values, and similar tastes or lifestyle. So aligned mission is like, do we want to go to the same place? Right. And I've looked at a lot of past relationships, they wanted different things from life. Again, I want to there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you want different things, then awesome. Like, just go do what you want to do and try and find somebody else who also wants to do that thing. And then that way you don't have to spend the rest of your life either resenting that person or compromising. Like, again, I'm not like a huge pro marriage guy. I'm pro like, do you, and if there's somebody else that's doing them and you can do that together, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, men live 12 years longer on average who are married. It's a life. So you want 12 more years, there you go. So one is aligned mission. You want to go to the same place. The second is aligned values, which is you want to get there the same way. Right? It's like, how are we going to choose to navigate how we're getting there? And Layla and I share very similar values. I remember, I think it was the first date, I was talking about upsells and some business thing. And she was just parroting back to me like all the stuff that this business was doing. And I was like, so you see that? She was like, yeah. And I felt really seen because I was like, I don't talk to anybody who thinks this stuff's interesting. And she was like, yeah, and then they do this. That's how they get you, blah, blah, blah. And I think that for me made me feel a lot less alone. Because I think a lot of times, I mean, probably a lot of guys and girls, like you feel very alone. And I think if you can have someone who doesn't make you feel alone, that's a really big gift. Because a lot of people are in relationships where like when you go to sleep at night and the person's next to you, you're laying on the pillow, you're like, darn, there you go. See, I didn't curse. Like, what am I doing? Like, what's like, and you feel more alone in that moment than you were when you were alone, right? Or lonely, whatever the quippy saying is. And so you want to have somebody who wants to get there the same way as you. Because I think if you have a shared experience of reality, then you get to enjoy everything together. If you have a different experience, which is why like when people live lives together and they live separate lives, I think one of the tough parts is like if the lady is at home all the time and the guy's getting exposed to work stimuli all the time, you're going to adapt to the environment you're in. And if you're in different environments, like in the beginning, the opposites attract part is what creates the chemistry. But if there isn't enough overlap, then it just fizzles because they're just two strangers. That it doesn't actually make sense for them to be together. Because like, why would you just be with this random girl who like, sure, maybe she's attractive, but then like, then what? Like she's into completely different things than you, right? And then it's like, you have no shared interests, which is really the last one, which is like the tastes and lifestyle and the things you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
So it's like, we both like fitness. if I liked fitness and the person I dated didn't like fitness, that would be a big part of my life that I wouldn't really like the way I eat and the way I work out. Yeah.
It's a big one.
It's a big chunk, right? Like if I didn't have somebody who was into that, like that is a pain.
Yeah.
Like that's just like now for me to be me, I actually, it's like a give on the other person. Like I have to ask for like, there's all this time I'm not going to spend with you for the rest of our lives together because of this interest that I have.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think with that one in particular, and I've seen this happen in other people's situations, is it can create resentment.
Yes.
Right? Because if you're someone who is training and you're looking after your body, you're minding what you eat, you're putting in all this effort, and you're with someone who just wants to sit there and eat trash and not exercise and not train and, get out of shape in the process. Yeah. And in the process of that, it leads to people getting out of shape and, you're there and, you're in good shape. Yeah. And then, your wife or girlfriend is kind of slowly ballooning up over the years, right? It creates resentment on both angles because you're like, hey, like, stop being a slob, like eat properly. Like, you want to push them in that way, not in a mean way, but you want to encourage them and you do want them to look good. And then they can also have that envy or jealousy of like, hey, like I don't, I'm sure you've seen situations where women want to like fatten up their men a little bit to kind of like keep.
Oh no, I have.
Right, like they're like, no, I don't want you. You're a little too ripped. You're looking a little too good, right? And it creates this very odd. Yeah. It creates a very weird dynamic. So something like being into fitness might not seem on paper like, oh, this is something important, but I actually think it is. I think it's very important. I think it's also important that I can see with you and her, you both have the self-improvement streak, right? If you're someone who's into self-improvement and you're with someone who is not, again, over time, that gap just grows. If you're just like, I'm getting better all the time, like I'm working, I'm trying to get better, I'm trying to level up, and the other person's just happy to just stay the same and just stagnate, again, over time, it creates the shift. And I think I don't know. I've seen that play out with other people. I'm very observant of other people's relationships, whether it's successful or unsuccessful. I like to learn from it all and then be like, okay, cool. I'm making notes on all this stuff, just like I do with other aspects of life.
I think the growth one's huge.
It is.
Like arguably the biggest. I mean, I think I'll give you an example. So if I had to name one trait about Layla that I value the most, it's that she's coachable. And so she responds to feedback immediately and aggressively. And so earlier on when we were dating, like if someone's laughing, they're like, you're so stupid, right? She used to say that. And I remember she said that to me. And I said, I don't like it when you say that. And maybe it was my own insecurities. Maybe I identify as being smart, whatever reason, right? And somebody could say, hey, you should just work on that, Alex. You shouldn't project it on her, blah, 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 whatever. It's a hell of a lot easier to just ask somebody to just not do this thing, right? And I remember telling her that. And to this day, she's never done it again.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like some big punishment or anything like that. It wasn't like some like, I was just like, can you not say that? I was like, I don't like it when you say that.
Yeah.
And her speed to correct behavior is unlike anything. I mean, she's faster than I am. Like she can hear something once and just immediately. That's why I think she's such a good operator for our companies. But like, if you have somebody who cannot take feedback, and that's with that kind of growth perspective, that's tough because then you can't orient yourselves with one another.
Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between changing like values versus changing a small behavior. You know what I mean?
And it's also that thing you said before, like men do want respect. Totally. Again, it's not what men actually want is not talked about a lot in our society, right? I think we hear a lot about what women want. We don't hear a lot about like, it's true, right? We don't, isn't there a woman, there's a movie called that, right? Like you don't hear a lot about like what men actually desire, right? And I think something like that, it's, I don't think it's an ego thing. I think it's just a respect thing, right? Calling someone, even if it's a joke, right? Saying, oh, the stupid, and I also think if someone loves and respects you, then they don't want to disrespect you. Even if it's something that seems like silly or frivolous or whatever, like if you said, hey, I don't like it when you do that, and they make a huge thing about it, to me that would be like a red flag. Because I'm like, hey, I'm doing all this, If you asked me, if you said, hey, Zuby, this thing you're doing is like really bothering me or whatever, and it's like some very minor thing, I'll be like, okay, cool, no problem. Like, I'll cut that out because I love you.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the other way around, cool. Like, I love and respect you. So cool. Like, whatever. Why hang on to that thing? Like, so, Alex, man, I know you've been super generous with your time.
Yeah,
I know we're coming up to the 2-hour mark.
Yeah.
So one last question before we close it out is, for anyone who is out there who is entrepreneur curious, right? Entrepreneur. Anyone out there who is there, either they're in a job already, or they're just coming out of college, or they're considering going to college, whatever. Lots of different situations. But for that guy or that gal who is just not sure of what to do, what should I do next? What should I do first? Yeah. What would be your advice for that person?
So I think you have to decide whether you want to make the work that you do right now your main hustle, or make your main thing the side hustle and your side hustle the main hustle. Meaning, if you're in a career that you enjoy and you just need to put your reps in, then stop being distracted and go all in on that, because not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur, right? It's definitely like glamorized right now. On the flip side, if you are like, I want to do this thing, I want to get into this entrepreneurial game, then you need to work really hard at your job, because excellence is a trait. And then you also need to work really hard outside of your job. And people are like, well, then that means that you're asking me to sacrifice my family, or you're asking me to sacrifice. Yes, I'm asking you. I mean, I'm not asking you anything. You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. Don't literally sacrifice your family.
Yeah, do not do on the altar. There's trade-offs and there's seasons. And if you have zero to start, then you need to get the momentum. And the momentum, just like, you have to work double time. Like, you have to do your normal job, and then you got to work to get ahead. And so my kind of steps there is like, start the thing, start making money from the thing, start making enough money that it replaces your current income. Do that for 6 months. And then at that point, you can get the rest of your time back and go all in on it. I think that's the safest bet to do it. To be clear, I did not do that. I saved up what I thought was 1.5 years of living, or maybe 2 years of living for me, which was $50,000. But then I spent that opening a gym, and then I had 2 months of rent left. And so I definitely went a little bit more do or die. And again, I've said before, and I'll say it again, I was lucky. I would not have advised myself to do that. I just think I got a 1 out of 5 shot, and it worked.
Awesome, man. And Alex, where's the best place for people to find and follow you online?
Well, if you're a podcaster, I have a podcast called The Game by Alex Hormozi, or with Alex Hormozi. If you type my name in, you'll find me. And if you're on the interwebs of YouTubes and stuff, if you type my name in, Alex Hormozi, you will find me. And if you're a company that does over $1 million or plus in profit, and you're looking for a minority partner to help you grow, or a majority exit, just go to acquisition.com, and we're happy to take a look at the company and see if we can help.
Awesome. Alex Hormozi, thanks for coming on the show, bro. It's been really good getting to know you, and to finally have you on. I've been wanting to chat to you for a while.
Oh, hopefully we delivered.
No doubt, man. 100%. Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.